Welcome to the Ryan Frank Podcast. Ryan is a family man, first and foremost, but he's also a pastor, publisher, and serial entrepreneur. This podcast will help you think, work, and create like never before.
Welcome to the Ryan Frank Podcast. This is Ryan Frank, and thank you so much for tuning in today. I want to just let you know that I am so grateful every week that you tune in on YouTube or you listen to the audio podcast. I hope that you find these conversations to be encouraging, inspiring, and also challenging to you in your life journey. Today, we are digging into such an important topic, and that is exploring special needs ministry. If you're a church leader, a church goer, you listen, there are so many families around you, maybe your own family, that have been impacted by special needs. I know this is the case for Beth and I. Our 18-year-old has special needs and more than likely will always live with us. And this topic is so near and dear to our heart, but it should be near and dear to each of our hearts. And I had the opportunity to have a conversation with Stephen Hunsley. We call him Doc Hunsley. Doc is so passionate about ministry to kids and families with special needs. God has given him a platform and the ability to train not just hundreds, but thousands and thousands of pastors and ministry leaders how to establish and build disability ministries or special needs ministries. So today we're going to talk about things like what kind of challenges do these families face? What can we do as a church to help minister and meet these needs, and so much more. I had a fascinating conversation. I found it to be fascinating. For those of you that are church leaders, especially kidmin leaders, trying to recruit volunteers, or if you have a special needs ministry and you need more volunteers, you don't want to miss the very end of the podcast. When we got to the last 10 minutes or so, Doc, started to just unload some nuggets of wisdom on how to recruit volunteers, and it was gold, so you don't want to miss that. Friends, I hope to see you all at the Kids Matter Conference. We are getting awful close. It's happening September 12th, 13th, and 14th in Nashville, Tennessee. This is the premier event for children's ministry leaders and their teams. I think it's the best, but I'm probably a little biased. Beth and I love welcoming 3,000 ministry leaders for this 3-day event, and we'd love to have you be a part. Go over to thekidsmatterconference.com, learn more about it, and of course, get registered. Well, friends, let's get this show on the road. Here is my conversation with Doc Hunsley, a little bit of a tongue twister for me, on exploring special needs ministry. I hope that you enjoy. Hey, what's up, Doc? Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. My honor to be here with you, Ryan.
Man, great to see you. As I said in the introduction, I just have so much, Beth and I have so much respect for you as a leader and so much admiration for you. And we just appreciate your heart for families that have been impacted by special needs. And I'm looking forward to today's conversation because so many of us, as ministry leaders and parents and community members, we know people either in our own family or really close to home that have been impacted by a special need of some sort or the other. And we're going to jump into a great conversation today about what can we do to be more intentional about being the hands and the feet of Jesus to these special people. And, Doc, this is something that's so close to your heart. Before we jump in, though, I would love for you to take a few minutes and just share with us about yourself, your family, your ministry journey, and what your ministry today looks like.
Yeah, my pleasure. So thank you again for having me. So again, I'm Doc Hunsley, and I'm the executive director and founder of SOAR Special Needs. SOAR stands for Special Opportunities, Abilities, and Relationships. And so first, to help you understand why I'm as passionate as I am today, let me kind of give you my backstory. Obviously, Doc's not my real name. My parents aren't that weird. I do have a brother. He is Dopey, but that's not his name either.
Yeah.
But my real name's Steven. Everyone calls me Doc because I'm a pediatrician. I was a pediatric ER doctor working in the emergency room, taking care of kids. And I got sick taking care of my patients. It's all I ever wanted to do since I was in first grade. Ended up in the hospital, spent 46 days in the intensive care unit, where the top 4 diagnoses on my chart, each one by itself had a 0.01 survival rate. Wow. None of the doctors expected me to live. 3 different times they told my wife to make plans because I wasn't going to make it through the night. Yeah. And God had his hand on me, allowed me to survive and live through that. Wow. I was so sick that they forgot to give me nutrition. And as a result, I lost 75 pounds of muscle mass. Wow. And had to go through 9 months of rehab just to walk again. And I was an athlete all my life. I served in the Air Force. I was in decent shape, but all of a sudden I couldn't even walk up a flight of stairs to our master bedroom without almost passing out because I couldn't breathe. Went through all my rehab, finally get ready to go back to work, had my flu shot, back to work. Second day on the job, ended up with influenza despite having my flu shot. Right back in the intensive care unit where once again I almost died. And they then determined I'm the only known person in the world. The main muscle allows you to breathe, goes across your abdomen, and that's called the diaphragm. Half of mine's paralyzed. It happened in that first hospitalization. Nobody knows why or how. If it was completely paralyzed, I'd be dead. If I had abnormal lungs, I'd be dead. My dad and brother have severe asthma. So again, God protected me.
Yeah.
And so made it out of that hospitalization. And then my second son was born. I'm blessed with 3 kids, but my second son, Mark, was born. And so took a week off for paternity leave and came back. And my first day back to work, I got called into a meeting, walked into the room. Every one of my bosses, from immediate boss to the chief of staff, was there. The entire HR department, 2 rows of attorneys, and a row of physicians I'd never met in my life. Wow. And they proceeded to tell me, with one chair facing the entire room, so that was my seat. I'm like, oh, snap. Wow. I see writing on the wall here. Yeah. And they proceeded to tell me I had been a great physician. However, I became a medical legal risk to the hospital. And they were afraid I could get sick and die. And therefore, effective immediately, they didn't terminate my job. They terminated my career and said I could never practice medicine again. And just like that, in the blink of an eye, I lost my career. I lost my job. I was escorted out by security, and I took the hardest job I ever had in my life, and that was Mr. Mom for my 2 boys. Yeah. When my second son, Mark, and his nickname for us is Bubba, when he was 8 months old, he had his first seizure, lasted over 4 hours. And by the time he was 2, by the time he was 18 months, we got the diagnosis of Dravet syndrome, very rare genetic seizure disorder. By the time he was 2, the diagnosis of autism. So my wife's a pediatrician as well. We went from being physicians taking care of kids with special needs to now being a parent. And it was the first time in our life we finally understood how difficult it is. I can't tell you a number of times, and I know you fully understand it, where we've been in public and my son has an autistic meltdown and complete strangers tell us we're not just a bad parent, we're horrible parents because they think it's bad parenting, or he's harming himself and I try to protect him. And I've had police officers threaten to arrest me or pull their gun and threaten to tase me because they think I'm endangering my son when we're doing the right and actual thing. And that's just due to lack of understanding and lack of knowledge in the general public. Yeah. Well, that crosses over to the church. The church we were going to when my son was young, we were having some issues there too. And God opened some doors and God made it clear it was time for me to become a children's pastor. And I became a children's pastor at the church we were attending. Did that for 4 years, grew a children's ministry from 100 kids to 1,000 kids. Eventually became their family pastor as well. Oversaw birth through high school and college. And I went to our senior pastor, said, hey, I want to start a special needs ministry. Having my own son, saw a couple of the kids, told him how I wanted to do it, what I want to do. His immediate response to me, Doc, I don't want those kind of people here.
Oh, wow. And
that was my first immediate realization. That's the feel for the majority of churches in the United States today. Yeah. In fact, only 11% of churches today welcome families with disabilities. 89% turn them away. And he said he loved my family, but he doesn't want the others. And we had to agree to disagree. I was called back in about a year later when there were 3 adults who were way too vocal with disabilities in the worship service. He told me to get rid of them. So instead, I started an adult Sunday school class for them and then a respite program for them. And then fast forward 12 years ago, my son, Mark, was cured of everything when he was born into heaven at the age of 5.5. So we were blessed with him for 5.5 years, learned the highs and lows of being a parent, than walk through the grief of losing a child with special needs.
Yeah.
And then 7 weeks after he passed away, my intestine exploded on me. I almost died. And God had his hand on me, allowed me to survive that. And it was during my recovery time and the grief that God made it clear it was time for us to leave that church.
Mhm.
Ended up leaving and led us to a new church that we were going to attend as a family. And I met with a children's pastor and told him, hey, look, in order for me to heal emotionally, physically, and spiritually, I need to serve others, to get my eyes off myself and onto others. And so next thing I knew, I had a call from him and the senior pastor, and they said, Doc, we've kind of stalked you socially. We've heard about you. We want to have a world-class kidmin here. But in order for us to do that, we have to do special needs ministry. We've never been able to do that. We've been praying for that for years. Would you start that for us?
Yeah.
So I joined the staff as their disability pastor as a volunteer, started with just what we knew we had, and that was 3 individuals. And that's how SOAR started, was a ministry at Grace Church. And I recruited 20 volunteers in that first month and was on staff for the next 8 years, grew it from 3 individuals to over 800 individuals with disabilities we served, grew a volunteer base from 20 volunteers to over 2,500.
Wow.
And then December of 19, I left staff and we became an independent nonprofit where we're doing all kinds of things. But today, basically, 26% of the US population today has special needs and disabilities, making them the largest minority group in the United States. Therefore, SOAR Special Needs exists to transform the lives of special families and empowers them to soar in the local and faith communities. And we help answer the 3 main questions every family with individual with disability has. Will my child ever be able to provide for themselves? Who will take care of my child once I'm gone? And who will take care of me as a parent or a caregiver?
Yeah.
So we do programming with all that. We host the nation's largest disability day camp. We provide respite. And one of the things I'm most passionate about is we come alongside churches and we train them of all faiths on how to welcome families with disabilities into their church of any size. So that's us in a quick nutshell.
Man, that was a mouthful.
It is.
What a story. I mean, of God's, so many stories, but a story of God's hand on your life and so many opportunities. God could have just taken you home, but he wasn't ready for you yet.
Yep. No, he's got a lot of work for me to do still.
He does. And thank you for what you're doing in the kingdom and to empower the church to take special needs seriously. I know I heard you say last year at the conference, it's, no longer is it do we have the liberty or the luxury of asking, should we have a special needs ministry?
That's right.
Right.
Now a requirement.
You've got to have a special needs ministry.
Right.
Can we go back for just a minute? Because I would love to unpack those 3 questions that every parent asks, because I wanted to talk about some of the challenges that families that are impacted by special needs face. And I think you summed it up so well in those 3 questions. Will you unpack those for us? Number 1 being, can my child provide for him or herself? Right.
Right. So those are the 3 questions that I had. And I was afraid to verbalize them because I didn't have an answer for that. And it wasn't until after my son passed away that I found out they were my wife's questions. And now every family we talk to, those are really their questions, but they're taboo because families don't have answers to them. So, we want to make sure every parent wants to make sure their child's going to be able to provide for themselves one day. Well, when you get a child with special needs and disabilities, that becomes now a real question. Society is not real big on allowing individuals to work. Even though 80% of individuals with disabilities are unemployed today, and they're some of the best employees you could ever get.
That's true.
And we just need to be able to welcome them and help them and train them, and employers need to be trained. So that's a big part that they need to have there. At the same time, parents frequently are the second question, who will take care of my child once I'm gone? Many times the parents are taking care of their child as adults, and they just can't live on their own. And with all the budget cuts in government here in the US, there's less and less funding for housing for individuals with disabilities and special needs. So there's not much out there. And it's a big fear, a big concern for parents out there. What's going to happen? And if you do have another child, neurotypical child, as a parent, you also don't want to place that burden on them as a sibling to have to take care of their sibling with disabilities the rest of their life either. And not all of them are comfortable or able to do that. So that's a big question. What's going to happen to them? And then that last question, who's going to take care of me? Parents, are going nonstop, and, they're trying to work. And here's the big number that people just don't realize. The divorce rate today for families with disabilities and special needs is estimated to be 90%, 90.
Is it,
And
is
if you
that right?
add a medical illness like seizures or diabetes, it jumps to 95%.
That's crazy.
It's insane.
Yeah.
And one of the big problems with that is the church isn't there to support them.
Yeah.
Because the church has turned their back on them, and they're desperately wanting the church. And that's where we need to come alongside and help them and support them and give them that break and share Jesus with them.
Yeah.
And, follow the commands that Jesus laid out in the Bible and do what he's asked us to do.
Yeah. Why do you think the divorce rate's so high? Is it just because there's so much stress and tension in the home?
That's a big part. I'll give you this is Doc's theory on this.
Mhm.
So many times one parent has to give up a career to take care of the kids, but especially with special needs. There's so many therapies and different things going on. So typically dad is working. And as a result, mom's usually the one that goes to all the doctor's appointments and the therapy appointments and learns how to do everything. There is a sky high amount of stress and tension going on that's unfathomable. It's never lessens.
Yeah.
Also, you can't just get the neighbor girl to come in and babysit for you.
That's a
So
good
you
point.
never get that chance to go out. I always tell everyone, remember back when we had COVID, we were all locked in for 2 months. That's everyday life for families with disabilities. We were all stir crazy at the end of 2 months because we couldn't get out.
Yeah.
Well, that never ends for our families.
Yeah.
But with this parent, the mom is frequently learning all the techniques to work with the child. Their life is busy. They don't get a chance to teach dad. So when dad tries to help intervene and deal with the behavior, doesn't know how to do it properly, mom frequently steps in and helps.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden do that over and over, dad feels like he's not needed. And he doesn't know how to take care of his own child. And so he'll start stepping away. And next thing you know, they just pull the eject button.
Yeah.
And so that's where we need to be there as well, supporting them, letting them know that Jesus loves them. We love them. And, their child's not a mistake. Their child's fearfully and wonderfully made and created on purpose and for a purpose.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't want to stay on the negative, but I do want to ask you this as well. That's a really staggering statistic that does not surprise me at all, that only 11% of churches in the US have a special needs ministry. 89%, you say, have turned their back. And that sounds harsh, but I'm telling you that's what it is in essence, isn't it? Why do you think so few churches take this seriously? Do you think it's intentional, unintentional? They don't know what to do? Why do you think 9 out of 10 churches don't have a special needs ministry?
That's a great question, Ryan. I think there's multi layers to it.
Okay.
But the biggest one is fear and lack of understanding. Especially autism. That's the biggest one we're always afraid of. Autism become the A word in church, and we're afraid to say it. And when we don't understand something, we want to put our head in the sand and act like it's not there. Yeah. And many churches go, oh no, we accept them. We're not going to tell you to go away. Well, if you have your kidmin and you got a family who has a child with autism come, do you tell that parent, oh, they can come, but you have to stay with them?
Yeah.
Well, if you treat that child and that family any different than any other child in your kidmin, you're not accepting them.
Yeah.
Because that parent has to have the stress of being there with them all week long. They need to go get their spiritual tank filled. And the churches think, oh no, we're taking them, we're helping, but parents have to help. Yeah. That's not helping. That mom's not getting blessed. That dad's not getting blessed. And they're going, well, I might as well stay at home. And so it's just a lack of fear. And we think we have to know everything.
Yeah.
You don't need to know everything. I always say, as a physician, as a parent, I've never given out an instruction manual, nor have I ever received one for my child when we got a diagnosis. It doesn't exist. No. How do you know how to take care of them? By spending time with them, by being a friend. And that's how I recruit volunteers. I say, I've got one requirement. Can you be a friend? It's as simple as that. But it's just a lack of understanding and knowledge and fear. The other thing that blows me away, a lot of churches will frequently put a lot of money towards KidMin and allow them to have a lot of resources. But when you try then to do something for special needs, there's no budget for that. I'll come in and try to do a training, and they're like, well, and my training might be $500, $1,000, and I'll train the entire church. Well, we don't have money for that. Well, but you just did this big party for the kids ministry, and you just spent $20,000 on that for a 2-hour night. And where are we putting our money, and what are we trying to do? So the church isn't realizing the need there and how we need to have this as an outreach. 90% of families with disabilities do not attend church.
I believe
it's the largest unmet people group in the United States. They're in our backyard. And for every KidMin that's listening today, here's the question I want to throw out to you. I want you, and you can email me, I'll send you the link to find it. You can easily get on a government link and find out what % of children are in special ed classes in your school districts around you. And let's call it 15%, 20%. If your church and your KidMin ministry doesn't match that of the school district, why? They're there in your midst. You're not reaching them.
That's true.
They want Jesus just as much as anyone else. I know your heart is to reach families for Christ. Well, we have to also reach these families for Christ. And we'd love to come alongside you and help you.
Boy, we do. That is so good. Doc, we could stop the podcast right now, but we're not going to. But that is so good. We have a mutual friend in Craig Johnson at Lakewood Church. And I remember Craig told me several years ago that he believes it's 20% training, 80% love and acceptance. In other words, as a church, you're right, we get overwhelmed with autism or all the special needs, and leaders don't feel like I'm trained, leave alone, I don't know how to train volunteers. And I think Craig's point is there is some training, but it's really more having a church full of people that just are willing to love and accept these kids and get the training that you need as the kids come in, but it starts with love and acceptance. Would you agree?
100%. 100%. Yes.
What would you say to a church that recognizes, we have a lot of church leaders that watch or listen to the podcast that maybe they've tried to start a special needs ministry in the past, or they recognize they need a special needs ministry, or they need to really take this seriously. Where does a church start? What are some practical first steps?
So first thing, pray. Start praying about it, that God will raise up the people you need to be able to do it. And you don't have to have a full-fledged ministry to be able to do this. Same thing, reach out to us. Contact SOAR. I'll give you a free hour consult to help you get started and go on the right track. We've also monthly have a disability ministry leaders network where we meet virtually to talk through issues. That's free, so we can help you with that. But then it's to start with who you already have. You start with the families you already have at your church. And if you sit here and say, well, we don't have anyone, you're lying to yourself. Currently today, it's at least 1 out of every 5 kids has a special needs or disability. Autism today is 1 out of 38. And so it's there. And many times the parents won't tell you because they're afraid as soon as they tell you, you're going to tell them that they're not welcomed. And I promise you've got a child or two that you're like, something's not right. We're constantly have behavior problems. Well, we're probably dealing with special needs. So then it's creating a team, praying that God will provide everything, recruiting volunteers, contact SOAR, we'll come in, we'll train you, we'll help you with the training so that you can be prepared to take care of them, and then start that. A special needs ministry is different than any other ministry because it affects the entire family. You're not just taking care of the individual, you're also taking care of the parents and the siblings. And it's the only ministry that truly has to go through every ministry in the church. And no one should ever age out of your ministry, because that child that's in preschool will eventually be in elementary. Then they'll eventually be in middle school and high school, and then they'll be an adult. And you have to be able to prepare for that all the time. But it's in every aspect, even our worship leaders. We have to train them on how to welcome people. Because, for instance, many times as a worship leader, they'll get up on Sunday morning and say, would you please stand and worship today? Well, what if someone's in a wheelchair? What if someone just had a hip replacement? They can't stand. And yes, they might say, well, if you're able, would you please stand and join us? Well, I don't even like that, to be honest. I want to get to what we're really trying to do. So why don't we train them to say, would you please join us in worshiping from your heart today? That just freed everything up. And you can stand, you can sit, you can do cartwheels. But that's really what we're wanting. And we just want the entire church to welcome every single person that comes into your church doors and welcome them for who they are and where they're at, and share Jesus with them, regardless of what they look like, what their diagnosis is. Let's see the heart and not see the diagnosis.
Amen. Amen. I'm with you on that. And I am with you that if you got serious, church leaders, about ministry to kids and families that have been impacted by special needs, and if people in your community knew that their kids were welcomed and that they were going to be loved and accepted, that could be one of your biggest outreach centers of the church.
Absolutely.
So it's amazing, isn't it, Doc, that we as church leaders, we look for all these innovative new ways to grow the church and reach people. And it's like we're overlooking this obvious one that is right here. And it's not just about growing your church, but I believe that this is so close to the heart of God, don't you?
Oh, completely. And God promises us this. So first off, welcoming individuals into the church and into our ministries, our kidmen, that's biblical. It's actually a biblical mandate. It's one of my favorite passages in scripture. It's Luke 14. And that, just kind of refresh that. That's the story of the wedding banquet, the wedding feast, where the bridegroom comes to Jesus and says, I've invited all my family and my friends, and we still have room at the table. And Jesus says, go now into the street, bring in the lame, the blind, the deaf, and give them a seat at the table being that of the church. Well, notice the first words Jesus said, go now.
Go.
He didn't say, go when you're ready, go when you're trained, go when you have the money, go now. And why? Because the church needs those with disabilities as much as those with disabilities need the church. They go hand in hand. But here's my favorite thing. This is so important to Jesus that it's one of the few times in scripture immediately following that passage, he gives the exact same parable and says it again. But this time he says, bring them into the church and give them a seat of honor at the table. Because Jesus doesn't want them just to be be in the church. He wants them in leadership. He wants them to serve and be volunteers. And then he says, why do you do this? So that you will be blessed. Your church will be blessed. And that is a promise. It's not just a parable. It is truly a promise. And I can say I've now trained up over 550 churches to do disability ministry throughout the United States, 17 countries around the world. Every church I've worked with has seen a blessing. I've got a church that is in a rural Kansas, 100 people. They contacted me, wanted help, didn't think they could do it. 5 years later, they've got 150 people in their church, a ministry of 25 ministering to disabilities and special needs.
Wow.
That's God blessing.
It is.
What I shared earlier with my church, we went from 3 to 800, 20 volunteers to 2,500 volunteers. That's just in my ministry. Imagine what it did to the rest of our church. We went from 1 campus to 4 campuses. That's God's blessing. And he'll do that in every church. And if we don't welcome families with disabilities, you're missing out on the blessing of God. And that's one of my biggest things I want to say. Why on earth would anyone want to miss out on one of God's blessings?
Yeah, exactly. That's so true. Do you feel like, Doc, that you have to start, what would you say to the pastors or ministry leaders today that need to do something? Do they need to wait until they have a leader? Do they need to pray a leader in? Or do you just start?
You just start, and that's why, again, Luke 14, Jesus said, go now. You do it now. You don't have to wait and have everything. You start ministering with what you have. And so, let me take a minute and just talk to our kidmin leaders who are listening right now, who may not have that leader. And you may have 1 or 2 kids in your ministry right now, and you just don't know what to do. You don't have to develop a whole big ministry to take care of them and their family. You need to take care of that individual and meet their needs. So you can simply do that by recruiting a volunteer to be a buddy, a guide on the side who will help them. Find some training. You again, contact me with SOAR, and we can help give you training, not just for that individual. It's great to train the entire children's ministry, the entire student ministry volunteers, because, and again, I was a kids pastor, and there's not many kids pastors or kidmin leaders I've talked to. All of our training usually is all the requirements that we have to do, never be left one-on-one. Here's the fire, yada, yada, bathroom policies.
Yeah.
I only found 1 children's ministry leader whose training actually covered anything on behavior.
Yeah.
Well, that's the number 1 reason why volunteers leave. They don't know how to handle behavior.
That's a good point.
75 to 80% of my training is how to prevent behavior and how to work through it.
Yeah.
Which works with everyone, not just with the individual with special needs.
Yeah.
So, I've had ministries that have found they can keep their volunteers after they go through my training as well. So it's just starting with what you have, meeting their needs, and going with that.
Doc, tell us again, where do we go to learn more about the training and coaching that you offer to help churches with disability ministries? What's your website?
Yep, absolutely. Our website is SOAR Special Needs, SOAR specialneeds.org. SOARspecialneeds.org. You can also email me directly at doc@soarspecialneeds.org, and I'm happy to get you set up with all that. We also have Facebook page. You can check us out, or Twitter, and all the above.
Perfect. You're working with all of these churches and helping them start, solidify, strengthen their special needs ministry. Can you share an example? What's one church that's doing something really significant or special to minister to kids or families impacted by special needs, and what are they doing?
Yeah, so I'll use one church here locally.
Okay.
It's actually one of the first churches that we worked with, and it's Abundant Life Church in Lee Summit, Missouri.
Okay.
And about 10 years ago, they reached out to me saying they were interested in starting a disability ministry. So I helped them get going with that. And they're now on their third director, but that program's going great. On a quarterly basis, they're providing a respite night where they're giving the parents a break, a night out, parents' night out, just for the individuals with special needs. They've got parent support group that's meeting on, I think, on a quarterly basis. I forget if that's quarterly or monthly, but then they have Sunday school class for all their kids and welcome them in and truly make them feel loved and a part of the church. The other thing that they're wanting to see how they can take everything to the next level. So they've partnered with us with SOAR, and they're a host for our day camp. We host, again, one of the nation's largest day camps. And so we're going to have 100 individuals ages 3 to 60 at the camp for a week, where we give 40 hours of respite care. We have a full medical team, full behavior teams, and give parents 40 hours of respite care, give these individuals experience they don't normally get to have. We write all of our own curriculum. This year, our theme is Camp Dinosaur, and we spell dinosaur SOAR.
Oh, that's fun.
And we're sharing the creation story and how God created each and every one of our friends on purpose and for a purpose, and to love Jesus.
Yeah.
And so I love how Abundant Life has caught it. It's gone through the DNA of their entire church. We're seeing that grow, but that just started with, hey, we'd like to see how we start that. And they just started with the ones that they had, and now it's growing. And now through the respite, through our camps, more families are coming to them. And that's what I love. And they're a beacon of light for families with disabilities in their community. And they truly love them and sharing the love of Jesus to them.
Isn't it neat to see when a church gets serious? They don't have to have all, they don't have to have all their ducks in a row and all kinds of money and all kinds of people. And they get serious with God's help about ministering to these, least of these, how God's favor and blessings just flow. You see it all the
Absolutely.
time, don't you?
Always.
Always. Doc, before we get to our final two questions, this has been such a great conversation. If you could have the ear of every pastor in America and just say one thing to them, what would you say?
I would ask them if they have a biblical church, and wait for their answer. And then I'd question that and say, well, are you really welcoming families with disabilities? Because until you do, your church is not a biblical church. You are not following the Luke 14 mandate. And ask them if they are ready to stand in front of God and be judged, because he will judge you for not following that command and not being a biblical church. And personally, I don't ever want to be there. As a KidMin leader, I don't want to be there when I know the Bible specifically says, welcome these families.
Yeah.
When you look at all of Jesus' miracles he did here on earth while he walked, 75% were done on those with disabilities. He healed the blind, he healed the lame, he healed the blind. Jesus really was the first special needs pastor. We always say we want to be more like Jesus. Well, we need to start acting like it. We need to welcome them in our church. We need to think through everything that we do on how we can welcome them. And it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take a lot of time. It just takes being willing to be a friend and step out of our comfort zone and allow someone to step up. And, I always hear, and if I may just go on another tangent,
Please,
and I know one thing that and I'll speak to every KidMin out there, we always have problems getting volunteers. And that's one of the biggest thing I always hear. We have a hard time getting volunteers.
Yeah.
Well, I've got the perfect fix for that. First off, and I've done this myself, our problem is we're always going after the same volunteers. Just about every church I know, Ryan, has the 80-20 rule.
That's true.
80% of the work's done by 20% of the people in the church.
Yeah.
Well, what does that tell me? It means 80% of the people that attend your church are nothing more than glorified knickknacks who sit in the church every Sunday and collect dust.
That's true.
They come in, collect dust, and leave. That's it.
Yeah.
Well, our problem is we're not going after that 80%. We're going after the same 20% who's always working, and that's why we can never find them.
Yeah.
So as a KidMin leader, and here's pure gold for everybody today. Make sure you pull out a pen and write this down.
Yep.
4 most important letters in volunteer recruitment. And it works for anything. I obviously use it for special needs, but it works in every area of ministry. 4 most important letters: I, C, N, U. I, C, N, U. And your most important job every weekend is not making sure ministry's going, making sure the kids are in the right place, making sure, all the volunteers are there. Your most important job is observing every person that walks into your ministry. And you're looking for characteristics of people who would make a good volunteer in your area. And so let me show you how this works. And Ryan, I'll use you.
Yeah.
I would literally walk up to you on a Sunday morning. I'd put my hand on your shoulder and say, hey, Ryan, good morning. How you doing, brother?
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? I've just got to let you know, I've been watching you the last few weeks. And I have to tell you, I see in you someone who's got an amazing heart for people. I see in you someone who's patient, and you've just got this loving spirit about you. And I've got a simple question for you. Can you be a friend? Guess what? I've never had anyone tell me no.
I bet you're right.
And then I'm like, fantastic. That's the only requirement we have to be able to serve in our special needs ministry. We can teach you everything else. You don't need to know anything. I've got a favor to ask of you now, Ryan. Would you please take the next 2 weeks and pray and see if God would have you serve in this ministry? Because I see in you someone who can transform the lives of these amazing individuals. And I want you to receive the blessing that God has for you.
Yeah.
Can we pray and then maybe in 2 weeks get together and have coffee and talk about it?
Yeah.
I've also never had anyone tell me no, they won't pray, especially when you're asking them that at church.
That's
They're
a
not
good
about
point.
to tell the pastor or a ministry leader they're not going to pray.
Yeah.
Here's the amazing thing. My statistics on getting volunteers doing that is 90 to 95% success rate.
Wow.
And I'm hitting the 80% who aren't doing anything.
Yeah.
And how did it work? I literally shoulder tapped. I then told them things I see in them that works. I told them, you met the only requirement. You can be a friend. I'll train you everything else.
Yeah.
And then, did I ask you, Ryan, to serve? No, I let God do my heavy work for me.
Amen.
I ask you to pray. I can't tell you the number of volunteers who have told me, oh, I was going to tell you, no, I'm not going to do it. But then you said, pray. And I can't tell the pastor, no, I'm not going to pray.
Yeah.
So I prayed and God convicted me.
Mm.
And that's how we do it. And we go after those and you'll see a growth. That's how I went from 20 volunteers to 2,500 in 8 years.
Yeah.
It works. And everyone I've trained on that, it works.
And you did it just one person at a time.
One person at a
ICU
time.
Yeah.
And then they can start doing it and it multiplies and it grows like crazy.
Yeah. And so many of these kids, and adults for that matter with special needs, that's really what they need. They need a friend. They need somebody to walk beside them and be their buddy and show the love of Jesus to them. And who can't do that? You're right.
Completely.
Yeah.
And use them as someone to help recruit, because individuals with special needs have this innate ability. They don't see your outside. They see straight to your heart.
Yeah.
And they know if you like them or not. And so watch who they go up to on Sunday mornings and who they start relating to. Those are your new volunteers. You start talking to them and they'll actually recruit volunteers to work with them.
Good point. Well, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Doc. So challenging, encouraging, inspiring. And podcast listeners, I hope that you will really take this to heart. And if you need Doc's help or his team's help, do not be afraid to email him or reach out to him on his website. This is what they're passionate about, is coming alongside people just like you and helping you with this. Doc, I always like to end the podcast by asking 2 questions. First, what's your favorite Bible story? And why is it your favorite Bible story?
Yeah, so I already kind of hit it a little bit earlier. My new favorite story has become Luke 14.
Luke 14.
The parables on the wedding banquet. And I shared why, because it's become a biblical mandate.
Yeah.
And then my quick second right after that, just the way God's made me so passionate with all of this is the story in John of the blind man sitting at the temple gates and everyone asking whose sin caused this man his blindness, his parents, who was it? And Jesus said, nobody's sin. It's blind so that he can see the glory of God.
Amen.
And we're missing out on seeing the glory of God by not working with these individuals. So I love all those together. It's just made me more passionate for what I'm doing. And, yes, I'm a physician. I never thought it would be possible, but I'm more passionate about what I'm doing today and reaching and loving on these individuals with special needs and showing them that Jesus is the way and doing it in a way that they can learn and know.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm going to go back tonight when I get home and read that Luke 14 passage, because that's good. And I probably have read that before about the seat of honor, but if I did, I've forgotten it. And what a great picture. I love that. All right. Second question I'd like to, and we'll kind of land the podcast on this question. I'd love to hear something big that Doc Hunsley is working on right now.
All right. So big thing. I'm just starting kind of mulling it over.
Yeah.
And that is writing a book on how to do disability ministry in the church. Because we need an update. And,
I'd love to see you do that.
My good friend Amy Fenton Lee wrote the last book. She's the expert and has kind of stepped away, and she's been challenging me for a while. So I just need to find time to put into that. But I'm passionate about this. I want to come alongside churches and just have something good out there where they're able to have that right at their fingertips to answer any question they might have.
You enjoy writing?
Yes, I just don't have enough time to do it.
But taking the time. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I think that would be great for you to do. There's definitely a need for more resources, and God has given you a message and a heart and a passion for this. Doc, thanks so much. Those of you that will be attending the Kids Matter conference, you'll have a chance to meet Doc and pick his brain and hear him speak and teach. And please take advantage of that. Doc, it won't be long before we'll be together in Nashville.
That's right. And we've got a whole special needs track.
Yeah, it's gonna be good.
at the conference that, I've been able to help and put together. I'm really excited. This is the best track we've had since I've been a part of the conference.
Do
So
you
I'm
think
really
so?
excited.
Man, that's
Oh,
great.
Yeah,
That's
we've
great.
got some amazing speakers coming, and the talks are going to be fantastic, whether you're just starting or if you already have something. We'll have something for everybody.
I love it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's Doc Hunsley. Doc, thanks so much for your time, and thank you for everything you're doing to equip the church to take disability ministry seriously.
Well, thank you so much for helping get the word out. And bottom line, come soar with us. We want to help you.
I love it. Thank you again.
God bless.
This episode of the Ryan Frank Podcast has ended, but be sure to subscribe for more conversations to help you stay on the leading edge. And if you like what you've heard, please rate this podcast with 5 stars. Thanks so much, and we will talk to you next time.